clothing, and they're studying the Talmud. They don't study the Bible. In fact, to go to a rabbinical seminary, you must study the Talmud, but the Old Testament, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, are said to be the most important, but not to the Jews. They don't care about any of it. They don't care about the Talmud, the Old Testament. They think it's a bunch of myths. It's just words. But it is important to them because the serpent is contained in the Torah. The serpent has slithered all the way through the 5 books of the Torah, and it's found there. And in fact, the very middle point in Leviticus is the very middle point. That's where they count every letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and they count how many letters are in the Torah. And the middle point is the belly of the serpent. Now, I recently read an article. It was entitled, "The Serpent Within the Serpent." This rabbi says that it's, Rabbi Bakst, B-A-K-S-T, says that this is a great secret. And evidently it's reserved only for the top rabbis throughout the world. But it's known by thousands of rabbis. This is their great secret. The serpent within the serpent. Who is the serpent within the serpent? Well, it's the Jewish people. They are the people of the serpent. And they're contained within the belly of the serpent, right in the middle of the serpent. And he is right in the middle of the Torah. When the Jew reads something in the Torah, he understands it different than you and I do. You see, we're taught plain language. We're taught in the New Testament, whatever Jesus said, he meant us to understand, and he said it very plainly. Now, there's some, of course, stories there that, when Jesus said, "I'm the light of the world," he's not a light bulb. When he said, "I'm the bread," he didn't mean he's a loaf of bread. Obviously, we got to understand things a little different than that. But I think you do. You understand. He's the bread of life. Of course, he's not a loaf of bread. But he is the food, the essential food. And if you don't have him, you're going to starve to death spiritually. He is the light of the world. You're going to be in darkness. You're going to be a blind person trying to lead other blind people. You're going to be a blind guide because you don't have the light of the world, which is Jesus Christ. We understand what it means. But every word in the Old Testament is understood different than you and I may think about. Now, the Jews have a prayer called the Shema. They say it constantly. Basically, it means the Lord, our God, is one. And an unlearned Jew will tell you that you worship multiple gods because you believe in the Holy Trinity. You believe in Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. You believe in 3 gods. Well, we Jews just worship one God. Of course, that is an ignorant Jew because he doesn't even understand his own religion. Because when the Jew says, the Lord our God is one, the Shema, they can do the Shema prayer, they're saying the universe is one. That there is only one deity, but he's dispersed throughout the universe. You can't find him anywhere. He is mysterious. He is ineffable. He is a great secret. Their God cannot talk to anybody. The rabbis say that the Jewish God cannot be seen, cannot be heard. He has never spoken to anybody. He doesn't speak to anybody. You cannot pray to this God. And he has a mysterious name. It's called Ein Sof. Now, you thought I was going to say Jehovah, didn't you? You thought I was going to talk about the great I Am. Well, they say that's not God. The rabbis say that's not God. Our God is Ein Sof. That's the great I, the all-seeing eye. But he doesn't see us. He doesn't want to see us. He's the source of all light in the universe. He puts off emanations or sparks. And these sparks become various gods and goddesses. And Judaism and the Kabbalah has named a number of gods and goddesses. So a Jew will worship many gods and goddesses. When they're having sex, they will call on the goddess that is Malkuth. Or they'll call on the Shekinah, the divine goddess. Or they may call on the Hesed. Who is the Hesed? Well, that's the divine, believe it or not, the phallus. Say what? The phallus is a god. Oh, yes.
But think about it. Who runs the porno industry in Hollywood? Right? And I remember when I was growing up, and even now when I watch these movies from like the 80s, and there's that adult scene in the movies, and they're like, oh God, oh God, oh God. Now it makes sense. When you put the two together, they're calling out, oh God, right? Who runs that industry? Because you're like, the adult situation, what does God have to do with that? Right? Right? That has nothing. That's not the time. That's just not the time to be calling on him. You know what I mean? So now that makes sense. The only thing they're not doing is saying the name of their God that they're calling on during that time. So it's sex magic.
There's a separate god named Hesod, Hesod. They have at least 3 that I know of feminine goddesses in Judaism, and numerous other gods and goddesses, but the chief god of all is the serpent. In fact, the serpent contains within itself the entire universe. Has to be a big serpent, doesn't it? And in fact, the Jews propose that there is a great serpent called Ouroboros. Ouroboros. He's a gigantic serpent. He's so big that he encompasses the whole universe, and he is slithering across this universe. He's gobbling it all up, country after country. He finally will reach his own tail. He'll circle all the way around the earth, grab his tail with his mouth, and then the great work of the Illuminati Jews will be completed.
The Ouroboros or Ouroboros, JRBRs, 2, is an ancient symbol depicting a serpent or dragon, 3, eating its own tail. The Ouroboros entered Western tradition via ancient Egyptian iconography and the Greek magical tradition. It was adopted as a symbol in Gnosticism and Hermeticism and most notably in alchemy. The term derives from ancient Greek Ouroboros, 4, from aroora, tail, plus boros, eating, 5, 6. The Ouroboros is often interpreted as a symbol for eternal cyclical renewal or a cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The snake's skin sloughing symbolizes the transmigration of souls. The snake biting its own tail is a fertility symbol in some religions. The tail is a phallic symbol and the mouth is a yonic or womb-like symbol. 7. China edited an early example of an Ouroboros, as a purely artistic representation, was discovered in China, on a piece of pottery in the Yellow River Basin. The jar belonged to the Neolithic Yangshuo culture which occupied the area along the basin from 5000 to 3000 BCE. 13.
Fair use. So I'm not sure if I can play much of this video, but I'll leave it in the description box. Check it out. There's a lot in this, like these secret society coming together and mapping out the plan to infect the character Batman with 5 types of metal. So his body acts as a, how would you say it? It would act as a portal. And it would act as a magnet, drawing something out of another realm to our Earth. In this story, and it made me think about the different metals that they keep popping up in food. Why are we putting mercury in people's bodies? Why is it when I try to buy fish to eat fish, I gotta be careful, and look up, has this company ever been in trouble with having mercury, in their fish, and then you think about the different metals in vaccines. You know, what's the purpose of having all that put in there? Is it, you know, does it fall in line with what they've done here? So it draws something to here. You see what I'm saying? So, but what made me stop and say, all right, let's try to snippet some of this to play, was when they start talking about this multiple Earth or universe thing. You know, because they show one that they illustrate that these universes are they're in the stars, what is it called, the star patterns there, like I can't think of the word, but I can see it right now. Like, it's in the sign of Leo. Like, in the sign of Leo, you'll have universes in those stars that make up the sign of Leo. In the Orion's belt, each of those quote unquote stars are a universe, right? That's what they're showing here. And in the conclusion of who's doing this, you know, you'll hear. So hopefully they let it play, but I'm not sure.
Give you information. Now, something that I hope you guys notice here are the words that Scott Snyder uses, because what he's basically doing here is he's building up the whole DC cosmic landscape. And that's what's cool, because unlike Marvel Comics, DC's cosmic landscape is not really fleshed out. And Marvel is fleshed out pretty well, just because of the fact that you had stories from guys like Steve Englehart, Jim Starlin, who built a lot of the cosmic landscape, and Marvel decided to blackball him recently. You had a lot of cosmic building that's been going on for decades and decades. In DC Comics, you don't really have that. But the whole cool thing about this is that this is really kind of Snyder basically giving us the Christ on Infinite Earth's origin of the universe without explicitly telling us. The origin of the universe, according to Christ on Infinite Earth, has been told so many times. We don't need to see the exact same thing of the hand rising out of the, beginning of creation and all that kind of good stuff. Instead, it's kind of like this brief run over. We're basically told in the beginning there was just darkness, and then from this darkness came life, and with this life came the positive multiverse and the antimatter universe. And so what you had is, in the positive multiverse, you had the Monitor, who was basically designed to kind of, overlook everything and make sure everything was doing what it's supposed to. But of course, we also have the Anti-Monitor, who we know is, kind of like the harbinger of destruction, the death of the multiverse. But what Scott Snyder does here is he brings in kind of like this third being who just created universes. What this does is it kind of answers the question where life came from. These universes that were created were basically done by some being who existed down in the World Forge. And what this person would do is they would craft universes and send them out there. The most stable of the universes were basically allowed to go into the multiverse, the positive matter multiverse. The unstable universes were confined back to the dark multiverse. It was basically a holding ground for those universes that don't work. The problem with this is that this World Forge, more or less, essentially had this kind of dragon of sorts. And this dragon would basically consume the various worlds that were considered to be unstable. Somewhere along the line, this dragon was corrupted. This dragon basically became a villain and then killed the Forger of Worlds. That dragon is Barbados. Following that, the dragon in turn basically went on this campaign to expand its own power. The cool thing about this is that this hits home directly to everything that's happened so far. And that's why I say this will all essentially come together. The way this timeline seems to play out is that where this dragon, basically Barbados, killed the Forger of Worlds, instead of these worlds just given quality control, more or less, the dragon kind of fell asleep at the wheel in the sense that all these worlds started going out there. Instead of them being consumed and destroyed, they just started filling up the dark multiverse. And that's why you have so many of these worlds out there. But somewhere along the line, what ended up happening here is that Carter Hall, basically when he was the original Hawkman, he encountered Nth Metal. And when he did, his main enemy was a guy named Hathset. When it came to the character of Hathset, he was looked upon by Barbados, and Barbados saw him as a means to basically enter the positive multiverse. When Barbados made his move and used Hathset to enter the positive multiverse, he encountered Hawkman. This in turn led to a battle between the two. Now, of course, the Nth Metal Mace was used to defeat Barbados, and that's where the standard comes from, that Nth Metal is the only material known that can defeat Barbados and anybody else from the dark multiverse. This in turn sent Barbados retreating. Because Barbados retreated, and because of the fact that the Bat Tribe was formed, the formation of the Bat Tribe led to the formation of the Owl Tribe, which is where the Court of Owls come from. The Court of Owls are kind of a more extreme group of the Bat Tribe who believed legitimately in Barbados and
I would go to yoga.
Theology that Batman has to be the means by which Barbados can make his return. And that's why, ever since the Court of Owls came into existence, their main goal has to always been prepare things for the arrival of Barbados by waiting until the time when Bruce Wayne becomes Batman and then imbuing him with all these metals, turning him into a doorway. All these things led to the arrival of Barbados. And so because of this, this is where it all kind of comes to a head. And so where we end up having this idea.
So last thing, I'm just wondering, if the quarter vowels, because it reminds me of that group that meets together in California. What is it called there? The group that meets together in Herb Grove, and they stand before that large owl and do their perverted things. That's what it brings my mind, back to, and I think of that and how it's like all these former presidents of these countries are doing this, and are they preparing the way for the serpent or dragon to return? So I just thought that both these things were interesting. I'll leave them both in the description box, all three, the link to this, and if you want to read more. So